The tap-tap-tapping of my cane on the hardwood floor echoes like a metronome marking time in a hollowed-out house. 3 steps, then the soft thud. 3 more, then the sharp tap. My morning ritual is always the same, from the bedroom to the bathroom, then the kitchen, into the living room, and finally, the study. These are the 5 rooms where I've drifted, a ghost in my own home since Eleanor passed away. Today marks exactly 137 days since her funeral. Each morning, I wake up and tear a page from the wall calendar, a habit I picked up during my working years. Eleanor always found it amusing. "There are digital calendars now, Arthur," she would tease, but I could see the affection in her eyes. She knew that this small ritual of keeping control over time meant something to me. My house here in Concord is large enough for a family of 5, but for a widower, it's become a museum of what used to be. It's a 2-story colonial that Eleanor and I fell in love with 35 years ago. I can still recall the moment we first stepped over the threshold, her hand squeezing mine. "This is where our Emily will grow up," she whispered. Emily. My daughter grew up within these walls, but now when she visits, she acts like she's entering a tomb. Her last visit was 3 weeks ago, a brief formal affair that felt more like fulfilling an obligation than spending time with her father. I pour coffee into a faded mug that says, "World's Best Dad." Emily gave it to me for my 50th birthday, back when she was still in college. It feels like a lifetime ago. The morning sun streams through the linen curtains Eleanor picked out from a small shop in Vermont. She always had an eye for quality. Our daughter inherited that, along with the dark hair and determined chin that were Harrison family traits. Only her spirit was different, softer, more easily influenced, far too easily. I settle into my armchair overlooking the garden and unfold the newspaper, a habit I hold on to even though I've already scanned the headlines online. At 76, there's a comfort in holding something solid in your hands. "I don't get why you still subscribe to that thing, Dad. You can barely read half of it without your glasses anyway," Emily had commented on her last visit, and I saw Mark's lips twitch into a smirk. "My vision is perfectly fine," I'd retorted, even though I was squinting to make out the small print. Besides, the paper supports local journalism. "You're always trying to justify your old habits with some noble purpose," Mark had scoffed, glancing at his new smartphone. "Just admit you prefer to stay stuck in the past." Eleanor would never have tolerated him speaking to me like that, but Eleanor's gone, and my daughter just offers a weak smile, her eyes darting away. I sigh, setting the paper down. The silence in the house is deafening. I sometimes turn on the television or radio just for the noise, though I've never cared for either. Eleanor was the one who filled this home with sound. Her laughter, the clatter of pots in the kitchen, the sound of jazz from the stereo in the living room. My eyes land on a photograph in a silver frame. Our family, 20 years ago, me, Eleanor, and a 15-year-old Emily, posing by Lake Winnipesaukee, all of us beaming. The wind is tossing Eleanor's hair, and Emily is leaning into my side with a trust and affection that makes my chest ache. Where did all of that go? I can pinpoint the exact moment things started to change. It was 7 years ago when Emily brought Mark home. He was tall and polished with a practiced smile and an ambition you could see in his every move. He'd just gotten a promotion at Eastern Seaboard Investments, where he worked as an analyst. One of the first things he asked, looking around our home, was, "How long has your family owned this property?" I didn't grasp it then, but he wasn't asking about the house's history. He was probing our financial standing. Eleanor, always sharper about these things, remarked later, "He was sizing us up, Arthur, not the house." For the first year of their relationship, Emily was her old self. She called nearly every day, visited on weekends, and chattered about her successes at the design firm. But slowly, the visits grew shorter and the calls less frequent. When she and Mark married 5 years ago, I felt like I had truly lost my daughter. Their wedding was a grand affair with 300 guests, most of whom were Mark's business contacts. Emily had wanted a smaller, more intimate wedding, but she yielded to her husband's wishes. I remember how she looked that day, stunning, but with a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, as if she were an actress in someone else's production. After a honeymoon in Santorini, they bought a condo in an exclusive part of Boston. Mark had risen to vice president of analytics, and Emily had quit her job at the design firm. "It's just for a little while, Dad," she had explained. "It's important for Mark's career that I'm available for corporate functions. Besides, we want to start a family soon." But the children never arrived, and Emily's temporary break from her career stretched into years. Now, her days are filled with charity luncheons and hosting parties that Mark claims are essential for his professional advancement. I drain my coffee and push myself up, leaning on my cane. My hip has been acting up for years, a souvenir from an old accident at a development site when I was a young civil engineer. I limp over to the bookshelf and take down a photo album. Eleanor was meticulous about chronicling our life together. Every photo is labeled in her elegant script, dates, places, occasions. I flip through the pages, watching our daughter grow. First steps, first day of kindergarten, high school graduation, college. The memories are painful, but I can't stay away from them. Not now, with Eleanor gone and Emily feeling like a near stranger. The last time we were all together as a family was 2 weeks before Eleanor passed. She already knew her diagnosis but carried herself with incredible grace. We had Emily and Mark over for dinner. Eleanor made her famous pot roast, our daughter's favorite. They arrived 40 minutes late. Mark apologized, blaming an urgent work call. He spent the meal glancing at his phone. Eleanor did her best to keep a conversation going, asking about their life, their plans for a vacation. "We're thinking about Italy," Emily said. "Mark really deserves a break after closing that big deal." "And what about you, sweetie?" Eleanor had asked. "Don't you deserve a vacation too?" Emily faltered, and Mark answered for her. "Emily does an excellent job being the wife of a successful man. That's a full-time job in itself, right?" I saw Eleanor's lips tighten. She had always been a strong, independent woman, expertly balancing her family life with her career in the Harrison family business. That dismissive attitude toward her daughter stung her deeply. While Emily helped her mother clear the dishes, Mark turned to me. "So, how's retirement treating you, Arthur? Don't you get bored?" "I still consult on a few projects," I told him. "My experience is still in demand." Right, he said, patting my shoulder as if I were a child talking about a make-believe friend. "Good to keep busy. At your age, it's important to keep the mind sharp." There was no overt insult, but the condescending tone, the way a younger man speaks to an old fellow he sees as irrelevant, was unmistakable. I held my tongue for Eleanor's and Emily's sake. Now, I wish I hadn't. I regret every time I swallowed his condescension, every time I failed to put Mark in his place, every time I let him believe I was just a feeble old man to be brushed aside. Eleanor saw it all. In her final days, when it was just the two of us, she spoke often about our daughter. "She's changed, Arthur," Eleanor would whisper from our bed, too frail to get up. "He's changing her, and it's not for the better." I closed the album and put it away. It's time to get ready for my weekly chess club meeting. It's one of the few social engagements I've maintained since I stopped working. The club meets at the local community college, and its members are a mix of men my age and younger folks. I enjoy the chance to interact with different generations. I climb the stairs to change my shirt. Our bedroom is almost exactly as Eleanor left it. I haven't had the heart to move her things. Her favorite perfume sits on the dresser. Her closet is still full of her clothes. The novel she was reading lies on her nightstand, a bookmark holding her place at page 213. Sometimes I sit in her armchair by the window and pretend she's still here, looking out at the garden she poured so much love into. I speak to her, telling her about my day. It might seem pathetic, but I don't care. I put on a wool sweater Eleanor bought me for my 70th birthday. You look like a New England poet in that, she had laughed, helping me adjust the collar. I smile at the memory, but a familiar sting returns to my eyes. Downstairs, I grab my car keys. Emily recently suggested it was time for me to give up driving, but I passed my DMV tests with no issues, and my license is good for another 3 years. Besides, I stick to local roads and routes I know by heart. I leave the house, locking the door behind me. My Subaru is an older model, but it's in mint condition. I take care of it with the same diligence I apply to the house. Mark once offered to help me pick out a new car, something more fitting for your standing, but I refused. Eleanor and I chose this car together, and I'm not giving it up. On the way to the college, I drive past the Harrison Manufacturing Building, the company Eleanor's father founded. The large brick and glass structure looms over the smaller buildings around it, a testament to the Harrison family's role in Concord's economy. Eleanor served on the board of directors while her brother, Robert, managed the day-to-day operations. I never involved myself in their family business, focusing on my own career in engineering at a regional development firm. By the time I retired, I was a lead project manager, overseeing major developments across 3 states. My salary provided a comfortable, stable income, and combined with Eleanor's inheritance, we lived very well. Emily and Mark likely assume I get by mostly on my pension. They are unaware of my investments or the consulting work that brings in extra income, and we never discuss the specifics of Eleanor's stake in the Harrison business in front of Mark. I park near the college library and walk slowly to the room where the chess club meets. On the way, I run into Sam Peterson, an old friend and one of my regular chess opponents. "How's the hip, Arthur?" he asks, eyeing my cane. "It's seen better days," I reply, "but Dr. Klein says I'm doing great for my age. How's Emily? Still with that arrogant finance guy?" Sam is one of the few who sees Mark for who he is. They met a couple of times at town functions, and Sam formed an immediate dislike for my son-in-law. "Nothing's changed," I sigh. "They stopped by 3 weeks ago, stayed for an hour, then rushed off, claiming they had an important meeting." "Have you considered moving closer to them?" Sam asks as we step into the clubroom. "Boston isn't so far, after all." "And be a nuisance?" I shake my head. "No, Sam, I'm staying in my home for as long as I can manage on my own. And when that's no longer possible, well, there are some very nice assisted living facilities." Sam frowns but doesn't press the issue. He's a widower too and gets my need for independence. We settle at a chessboard, and for a little while, my worries fade away as I focus on the familiar strategy of the game. My mind feels sharper as I plan my moves, calculate possibilities, and anticipate my opponent's tactics. In these moments, I feel younger, more capable. After a few games, 2 of which I win, Sam and I head to the campus cafe for coffee. Dr. Evans, a business professor and a younger member of the club, joins us. "I was sorry to hear about Eleanor Harrison's passing," he says, turning to me. "My condolences, Mr. Miller. I've been using Harrison Manufacturing as a case study for my students, a remarkable company with a deep-rooted corporate culture." "Thank you, Dr. Evans," I nod. "Eleanor was very proud of her family's company." "I understand the controlling stake is still held within the family?" the professor inquires. "Yes, between Robert and," I hesitate, not wanting to get into the details of the inheritance, "the other family members." Dr. Evans politely changes the subject, but the brief exchange pulls my thoughts back to Eleanor's estate. I know I need to meet with the Harrison family lawyer soon to go over her will. Eleanor never spoke plainly about her financial plans, but had hinted that she had made sure I would be taken care of. When Sam and I part ways, he invites me to dinner next Friday. "My daughter Lauren is visiting with the grandkids," he says. "They'd love to see you." I accept, a pang of envy twisting inside me. Sam and his daughter have always been close, even after she got married. She calls him daily and brings the kids over on weekends. So different from my relationship with Emily. On the way home, I stop at the grocery store. The shopping cart looks so sparse with items for just one person. A bag of coffee, a loaf of bread, eggs, a few apples, a pre-made meal from the deli counter. I don't cook much anymore. What's the point when it's just for me? At the checkout, I see a local paper with a headline about Harrison Manufacturing's expansion plans. I grab a copy to read later. Back home, I put the car away and walk slowly to the front door. The house greets me with its usual cool silence. I switch on the hall light, hang up my sweater, and head to the kitchen to put away my groceries. While the deli meal heats in the microwave, I scan the mail in the newspaper. The article on Harrison Manufacturing details a new line of biodegradable industrial lubricants that the company plans to launch next quarter. That was Eleanor's initiative. She always believed that a business had to be responsible, not just profitable. I eat dinner in the dining room, sitting at the head of a large table that can seat 12. Eleanor and I used to host dinner parties here for our friends and colleagues. Now, I use only this one end of the table. The rest is covered with a dust cloth to protect the polished mahogany. After eating, I pick up a book and settle in the living room. The grandfather clock on the mantel chimes 9. This used to be the time when Eleanor and I would talk about our day, sharing news and making plans. Now, I just listen to the clock's steady ticking and the rustle of the pages. The phone rings, its sound jarring in the quiet house. Emily's name appears on the screen. I pick it up, forcing a cheerful tone into my voice. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounds tight. "How are you?" "I'm doing well, honey. I was at the chess club today. Won 2 games against Sam." "Oh, that's nice." A pause. "Dad, Mark and I were talking. Have you given any more thought to selling the house? It's just too much for one person to manage, and the upkeep must be a burden." There it is. I knew this was coming. "I love this house, Emily, and I'm managing the upkeep just fine. I have a cleaning service that comes twice a week." "But it's so impractical, Dad. You could find a smaller condo, maybe in a nice retirement community. You'd have company, medical staff on site." "I don't need on-site medical staff," I cut in. "And I'm not selling the house you grew up in, the house where your mother and I built our lives together." A silence hangs on the line, followed by a sigh. "It's just a building, Dad, and the money from the sale would ensure you have a comfortable retirement." "My retirement is already quite comfortable," I reply, irritation creeping into my voice, "and I would much rather my daughter visit me here than in some gated community." "Mark and I are very busy, you know that." Her voice is almost defensive now. "But we worry about you." I bite back a bitter laugh. Worry. I'd like to believe that. But this isn't about concern. It's about the house they assume will be theirs one day, and it seems they're tired of waiting. "Thank you for your concern, Emily, but I am perfectly capable and happy in my own home." "Okay, Dad." Her tone signals that this conversation isn't over, merely postponed. "We'll try to come down next week and we can talk about it in person." We say our goodbyes. I hang up the phone, a heavy feeling settling in my chest. My daughter's calls used to be a source of joy. Now they are a source of pressure and unspoken demands. I head upstairs. Before getting into bed, I look at the picture of Eleanor on my nightstand, just as I do every night. "They're getting more insistent, my love," I say to her portrait. "I don't know how much longer I can hold them off." As I drift off to sleep, I imagine what Eleanor would say. She was always the stronger one when it came to resisting pressure. "Don't let them push you around, Arthur." I can almost hear her voice. "You deserve respect, especially from your own child." With that thought, I fall asleep in my bed, in our bed, alone in the big, quiet house. The law offices of Chen, Morrison, and Associates were located in a historic building in downtown Concord. I'd been here a few times with Eleanor for some family legal matters. Today, I pushed through the heavy oak doors by myself, leaning on my cane more than usual. My hip had been throbbing during the night, a stark reminder of my age and the body's eventual decay. The young receptionist smiled at me with the polite deference people often show the elderly. "Mr. Miller? Mr. Chen is expecting you. You can go right into conference room 3. I nodded and made my way slowly down the hall, my eyes scanning the portraits of the firm's partners on the walls. I wondered if I would ever reach a day when people saw me not as a frail old man, but as a person with a lifetime of experience and wisdom. Or is that just a comforting story all old people tell themselves, clinging to their last shreds of relevance? David Chen rose to greet me as I entered the conference room. A man in his early 60s, he had been a friend of the Harrison family since Eleanor's father's time. His perfectly tailored suit and neatly trimmed gray hair gave him the air of a successful old guard attorney. "Arthur," he said, shaking my hand with genuine warmth, "it's good to see you, though I wish the circumstances were better." "David," I nodded, "thank you for making the time." "I always have time for the Harrison family." He gestured to a chair. "Please, have a seat. Can I get you some coffee?" "That would be nice, thank you." I lowered myself into the plush leather chair, trying not to show the pain in my hip. Chen noticed my slight wince and frowned. "Everything all right?" "Just an old injury acting up." I waved it off. "It's nothing." He nodded and used the intercom to order coffee for us. Then he pulled a thick folder from his briefcase and laid it on the table. "Arthur, I know it hasn't been long since," he paused, "since Eleanor's passing, but there are some legal matters that require timely attention." "I understand," I said, trying to remain composed, though the mention of her name was still a fresh wound. "Good." Chen opened the folder. "As you know, Harrison Manufacturing was started by Eleanor's father in 1958 as a small lab producing industrial lubricants. Today, it's a diversified chemical company with an annual revenue of over $200 million. I nodded. It was a story Eleanor had told me many times. "After Eleanor's parents passed away," Chen continued, "ownership of the company was divided, with 40% going to her and 60% to her brother, Robert. Robert became the CEO, and Eleanor took a seat on the board, retaining voting rights on all strategic decisions." A knock at the door signaled the arrival of the secretary with a tray of coffee. Chen waited until we were alone again. "In her will," he went on, taking a sip of coffee, "Eleanor left very specific instructions regarding her share of the company. Arthur, she left all of her shares to you." I gripped my coffee cup so tightly my knuckles went white. I had an inkling of something like this, but hearing it confirmed was another matter. What is the estimated value of those shares?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Based on the most recent valuation conducted 3 months ago, Eleanor's 40% stake in Harrison Manufacturing is valued at approximately $9 million. The number felt like a physical blow. $9 million. A life-altering sum. I took a slow breath, trying to process this new reality. "What about Emily?" I asked. "Did Eleanor not leave anything for our daughter?" Chen's lips thinned. He pulled another document from the folder. "This is a personal letter from Eleanor, addressed to you. She instructed me to give it to you with the official inheritance documents." He passed a sealed envelope across the table. My name was written on it in Eleanor's familiar, elegant handwriting. I took it, my own hands trembling slightly. "I believe you will find the answers to your questions in there," Chen said gently. For now we can go over the technical side of the stock transfer and your new role as a major shareholder. The next hour passed in a blur of legal jargon. Chen explained the documents I needed to sign, the taxes that would be due, and how I would interact with the board of directors. I listened with only half my attention, my mind constantly returning to the sealed envelope burning a hole in my jacket pocket. "Does Robert know about Eleanor's decision?" I asked as we were finishing up. "Yes, I met with him last week," Chen confirmed. "He was surprised, but he accepts his sister's wishes. He's looking forward to meeting with you to discuss the future." "And Emily, does she know?" Chen shook his head. "As per Eleanor's instructions, the details of the inheritance were to be disclosed to you first. It is at your discretion how and when you inform the other family members." I nodded, the weight of a difficult decision settling on me. How was I going to tell my daughter that her mother's multi-million-dollar inheritance had passed over her and gone to me? "Thank you, David," I said, getting to my feet and leaning on my cane. "I need some time to process all this." "Of course," he stood as well. "You know where to find me if anything comes up." "And Arthur," he paused. "Eleanor was a brilliant woman. She always knew exactly what she was doing." I shook his hand in silent agreement and walked out of the office, feeling the eyes of the staff on my back. I wondered if they knew I had just become a multimillionaire, or did they just see a grieving old man with a cane, the widower of Eleanor Harrison? In the car, I couldn't wait any longer. I tore open the envelope. Inside were several pages filled with that familiar handwriting. I took a deep breath and began to read. "My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Forgive the cliché, but some things just have to be said plainly, even if they sound like they're from a bad novel. I know you must be shocked by my decision to leave you my shares in the family business. You might even feel it is unfair to Emily. Please, let me explain. When my father founded Harrison Manufacturing, his core belief was that the business should serve the family, not that the family should serve the business. He wasn't building an empire just for the sake of money. He was building it to secure a future for his children and grandchildren, but not just a financial future. He wanted the business to be a force that upheld our family values and strengthened the bonds between generations. Over these last few years, I've watched our daughter change under Mark's influence. The bright, ambitious, independent young woman we raised is slowly becoming a mere accessory to her husband, a shadow of her former self. I don't lay all the blame on Mark. Emily has made her own choices, but I cannot ignore how those choices are pulling her away from us, and especially from you. Do you recall Thanksgiving 3 years back? We had them over for dinner, Mark talked nonstop about investment strategies and the importance of growing capital. When you told a story about helping a former colleague who had fallen on hard times, Mark called it an inefficient allocation of personal resources. And Emily? She just sat there and nodded, as if his cold, transactional view of the world was her own. Or think about last Christmas, when Mark insisted they spend the holiday not with us, but at a ski resort with his business partners. Emily called you only 3 days before Christmas, knowing full well how much you were looking forward to having her here. I saw your face after that phone call, Arthur. I saw how you tried to hide your hurt by saying that young people have to live their own lives. And remember last year when you had that frightening heart episode? Emily didn't come to the hospital because Mark had an important client dinner. They didn't show up until the 3rd day when you were out of danger, and Mark spent the entire visit checking his phone, clearly bored and eager to leave. I am not telling you this to stir up old resentments. I want you to understand that my decision about the shares is not just about money. It is my way of protecting the legacy my father built for our family. If I had left my shares to Emily, they would in effect become Mark's. I have seen the way he looks at our family's wealth as a resource to be leveraged, a tool for his own ambition. In his hands, the family business would lose its soul and become just another asset in his portfolio. You, Arthur, even though you aren't a Harrison by birth, have always grasped the real value of what my father built. You respect tradition, you prioritize people over profits, and you have never been driven by status or the trappings of wealth. You are the one person I can trust with my family's legacy. This does not mean Emily should be left with nothing. I am simply giving you the authority to decide when and how she might participate in the family's future. Perhaps over time, she will re-examine her priorities. Perhaps she will remember the values we instilled in her, or perhaps she will continue down the path Mark has set for her. Whatever happens, I trust your judgment to make the right choice. Forgive me for placing this weight on your shoulders. I know it will not be easy. Emily may not understand. She may accuse you of taking what is rightfully hers. Mark will likely apply pressure, use legal threats, and play on your love for your daughter. Be ready for it, my love. But remember, you are far stronger than you appear. Beneath your gentle nature is a core of steel that I have always admired. Do not let them make you doubt your own mind. Do not let them treat you like a doddering old man who can be easily manipulated. You have earned respect from both your daughter and your son-in-law. I loved you every single day we had together, Arthur, and even now, as I leave you, my love and concern remain. Use this inheritance wisely. Not to buy Emily's affection or Mark's respect. That is impossible. Use it to live well, to champion the values we both hold dear, and to continue my work at Harrison Manufacturing. And please, do not let your grief for me overshadow the years you have left. Live. Enjoy every single day. I will be with you in every breath you take, in every beat of your heart. Forever yours, Eleanor. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear splashed onto the page, smudging the ink. I carefully folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. Even in death, Eleanor had found a way to stand by me, to protect me, and to give me the strength for what was to come. I started the car and headed for home, my mind racing with everything I had just learned. Eleanor's letter didn't tell me anything I didn't already know, but seeing it all laid out so clearly solidified my resolve. Hiding this inheritance from Emily and Mark was not a long-term option. They would find out eventually, and the fallout would be immense. At home, the first thing I did was go to my study and pull out a large box of photos and documents, a family chronicle that Eleanor had diligently maintained for decades. Sifting through the pictures, I could trace the change in my daughter. Here was Emily at her college graduation, radiating pride and confidence. Here she was at her first job at a design firm, her desk covered in blueprints. And here, the first photo with Mark, taken at some charity gala. He was already positioned slightly in front of her, subtly pushing her into the background. I remembered how Emily used to talk about her work, her eyes shining as she described restoring historic buildings in downtown Boston. Where had that fire gone? Where were her dreams and ambitions? They had all been subsumed by Mark's career, by his relentless pursuit of status and wealth. My gaze settled on a photo from a recent Thanksgiving. Emily sat beside Mark, her posture stiff, her smile looking forced. This was not the happy, confident girl Eleanor and I had raised. This was a woman who had lost herself in a marriage to a man who saw her as an accessory to his own success. I recalled other incidents Eleanor hadn't mentioned in her letter. How Mark had persuaded Emily to turn down a major restoration project because a banker's wife shouldn't be working on a construction site, how he had insisted they move to a neighborhood populated by his colleagues, even though Emily loved their old home near the city center, how he had slowly but surely edged out all her friends who didn't fit into his ambitious world, and I saw how their treatment of me had shifted since Eleanor's death. Before, there was at least a veneer of respect. Now, even that thin pretense was gone. I had become a problem to be managed, an inconvenient reminder of their filial duty. The recent conversation about selling the house was just the beginning. I knew what would follow: concerned suggestions about moving to a nursing home, hints about my inability to care for myself, and then perhaps legal steps to have me declared incompetent. And now the inheritance was a new, explosive factor. $9 million, a sum that could tear apart even the most stable families. What would it do to a relationship already stretched to its breaking point? I walked to the study window and looked out at the garden Eleanor had cherished. The apple trees we planted the year Emily was born were now heavy with fruit. The gazebo where we spent countless summer evenings. This place held the memories of our family's best years. The decision wasn't easy, but ultimately it was clear. I had to protect Eleanor's legacy, not just the financial aspect, but the spiritual one as well. I had to honor her final wish and the faith she had placed in me. I would not tell Emily and Mark about the inheritance, at least, not yet. First, I needed to meet with Robert to understand the inner workings of the company, to get up to speed. I had to arm myself for the inevitable confrontation that would come when the truth emerged, as it surely would. I had no illusions about that. In a town like Concord, secrets don't stay secrets for long. As Eleanor had foreseen, a difficult trial lay ahead. But now I had her letter, a shield, a reminder that I was not alone, that my actions were aligned with her will, and that I was defending something we both believed in. I put the photos back in the box and closed the lid. Then I picked up my phone and found Robert Harrison's number. It was time to step up. It was time to prove that I was not some helpless old man to be manipulated and dismissed. I was Arthur Miller, Eleanor Harrison's husband, and now a $9 million shareholder in Harrison Manufacturing. 2 weeks had passed since I learned of the inheritance. In that time, I had met with Robert Harrison, Eleanor's brother, and begun to immerse myself in the business of Harrison Manufacturing. Robert was surprisingly welcoming. It turned out he had always respected my engineering background and management skills. We agreed that I would start attending the monthly board meetings and get involved with the company's current projects, particularly the new line of green lubricants that Eleanor had initiated. I carefully avoided the topic of the inheritance in my conversations with Emily. She called a couple of times, attempting to bring up the sale of the house again, but I skillfully steered the conversation elsewhere. I needed more time to prepare my strategy. That Saturday morning, I was tending to the garden. Eleanor had always insisted we do the yard work ourselves, even when we could have easily hired a gardener. "It's good for the soul," she would say, and she was right. Now, working in the garden felt like a way to stay connected to her. The sound of an approaching car made me look up from the rose bushes. Mark's black BMW was pulling up to the gate. I wasn't expecting them. Emily hadn't mentioned a visit in our last call. A second car, a silver Lexus I didn't recognize, parked behind the BMW. I slowly straightened up, brushed the dirt from my gardening gloves, and headed toward the house. My hip was protesting, forcing me to lean heavily on my cane. Not now, I thought, trying to keep my face neutral so as not to show any pain. Mark was already at the front door, pressing the bell as I came in through the back. Emily stood beside him, looking pale and tense. Just behind them stood an unfamiliar man in a dark suit, holding a leather briefcase. "Dad?" Emily stepped forward as I opened the door. "We need to talk." "Of course, dear." I tried to offer a welcoming smile. "Come in. I just need to wash my hands." I walked toward the guest bathroom, feeling the tension in the air. Something was wrong. Something had shifted. Emily didn't just seem anxious, she looked almost scared. And Mark, he radiated a specific energy I had seen before, right before a major business deal, a mix of aggression and eager anticipation. When I came back to the living room, all three were seated on the sofa. Mark was in the middle, with Emily on his left and the stranger on his right. I lowered myself into my armchair, trying to appear at ease. "So, what's the occasion?" I asked, looking directly at my daughter. "Arthur." Mark took charge, not giving Emily a chance to speak. "I'd like to introduce Mr. Andrew Greenberg, a senior partner at Greenberg and Associates." The lawyer gave me a curt nod. "Mr. Miller." "Mr. Greenberg." I nodded back, a knot tightening in my stomach. A lawyer, so this was serious. "Dad," Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Why didn't you tell us about Mom's shares?" There it was. The truth was out, just as I'd known it would be. The only question was how they had learned of it. "How did you find out?" I asked, deciding not to deny it. "I have contacts in the financial world," Mark said, puffing out his chest, clearly proud of his access. "Concord is a small town, Arthur. A transaction of that size doesn't stay quiet for long." I nodded, accepting the explanation. It was plausible. Someone at Harrison Manufacturing could have let it slip, or perhaps Robert himself had mentioned it to a business associate. Word travels fast in those circles. "And what is it you want to discuss?" I asked, refusing to make it easy for them. "Dad," Emily leaned forward. "Mom left you her stake in the company. It's $9 million. "I'm aware of the value of the shares, dear," I said quietly. "Then you have to know this isn't right." Her voice was laced with grievance. "Mom always said the Harrison business was a family legacy, meant to be passed down through the generations. I'm her daughter, her only child. Why would she write me out of her will?" I looked at her and saw real pain in her eyes, not just greed. But then I saw Mark's hand on her shoulder in a possessive, guiding gesture. "Eleanor had every right to distribute her assets as she wished," I stated. "She made her choice, and I plan to respect it." "A choice made while she was gravely ill, under the influence of powerful medication," Greenberg interjected, opening his briefcase. "We have reason to believe that Eleanor Harrison was not of sound mind when she signed the final version of her will." "What?" I felt a surge of anger. "You never even met her. Eleanor was sharp and clear-headed until the very end. The cancer never touched her mind." "Nevertheless," Greenberg said, pulling out some papers, "the medications she was on can have significant cognitive side effects. We have consulted with medical experts." "What experts?" My voice hardened. "Did you get access to her private medical files? That's illegal." "We have based our assessment on publicly available information about the side effects of certain drugs," the lawyer replied smoothly. "And there is ample legal precedent for challenging wills made under these kinds of circumstances." I shifted my gaze to Emily. She looked uneasy but said nothing to stop this charade. Did she truly believe her mother was incompetent, or was she simply letting Mark run the show, as always? "We don't want to drag this through the courts, Arthur," Mark said, his voice now soft, almost conciliatory. "We're family. We can resolve this amicably. A fair distribution of the inheritance is all we're asking for." "And what do you consider fair?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "A complete transfer of the shares to Emily," Mark replied without a moment's hesitation. "It's her mother's legacy after all. Her family's business. You've had a good life, Arthur. You have your pension, this house. Emily has her future to think of, children to raise." I nearly laughed. Children. The ones they kept postponing because Mark's career always came first. Now, suddenly, they remembered these hypothetical grandchildren when there was money on the line. Eleanor wanted her business to remain in good hands, I said, in the hands of someone who shared her vision and her values. Are you saying I don't share my own mother's values? Emily's face twisted in resentment. I'm only saying that Eleanor's decision was carefully considered, I replied, and I have no intention of going against it. Then you give us no other option, Greenberg sighed. We will be forced to file a legal challenge, and I should warn you, Mr. Miller, that such a challenge might not be limited to the will itself. What other aspects? I tensed. Given your age and certain observations regarding your physical and mental state, the lawyer said carefully, we may have to raise the question of your capacity to manage such a substantial asset. A cold fury washed over me. This was it. The very thing Eleanor had warned me about. They were going to try to have me declared incompetent to seize control of the inheritance. Dad? Emily looked alarmed, as if the full implication of their strategy was just now dawning on her. We don't want it to come to that. But you have to see, it's too much money, too much responsibility for someone your age. My age, I repeated slowly. So you believe that at 76, I'm incapable of making decisions, incapable of managing a business, even after spending 30 years as a project lead at a major firm? That was a long time ago, Dad, Emily said softly, as if soothing a child. The world has changed. Business has changed. It would be difficult for you to keep up. But not for Mark, of course. I turned my gaze to my son-in-law. He's such a modern, forward-thinking man of finance. I work in this world every day, Arthur, Mark shrugged. I have the experience in the network. I could be a great asset to the company. I'm sure you could, I nodded. It's just that Eleanor seemed to disagree. A flicker of annoyance crossed Mark's face, but he quickly regained his composure. Look, Arthur, he said, adopting a business-like tone. Let's be practical. Even if you fight this and win, and it will be a long, draining process that will damage your health, who will the shares go to when you're gone? Emily is your only heir. Wouldn't it be smarter to just transfer them now and avoid all the unnecessary conflict and legal fees? I looked at him, at his confident, almost smug expression, the face of a man accustomed to getting his way. I looked at Emily, who no longer seemed like my daughter but like Mark's silent partner. And I looked at the lawyer, ready to use my age as a weapon against me. And I knew it was time to play my hand. You're right, Mark, I said calmly. No one wants a drawn-out legal battle, and I recognize that at my age it would be foolish to think in terms of decades. A wave of relief washed over their faces. They thought I was broken. They thought I was surrendering. That is why, I continued, I have already taken the necessary precautions. I pushed myself to my feet, leaned on my cane, and walked over to the secretary desk in the corner of the room. I opened a drawer and retrieved a folder of documents that David Chen and I had prepared over the past 2 weeks. What's that? Mark frowned. These are the documents transferring control of my shares in Harrison Manufacturing to a management trust, I said, returning to my chair. Great. Under the terms of this agreement, I retain a lifetime income from the shares, but the operational management of my stake is transferred to the company's board of directors. Upon my death, the shares will be offered for public sale, with the existing shareholders having the right of first refusal. What? Mark shot to his feet. You can't do that. I already have. I placed the documents on the coffee table between us. The agreement was signed and notarized 3 days ago. It is legally ironclad. Feel free to review it, Mr. Greenberg. The lawyer snatched the papers and began to read through them, his expression growing grimmer with each page. It's, indeed, he cleared his throat. The document appears to be in order. but we can still challenge it based on the same grounds of incapacity. You can certainly try, I smiled, but you should know that 2 independent physicians were present at the signing to attest to my sound mental state. I also had a full medical workup last week, the results of which are attached to these documents. And yes, I took an IQ test, scored a 138 in case you were curious. Not bad for a man my age, wouldn't you say? Mark went pale. I could almost see the gears turning in his head as he calculated his options and realized he had lost. The shares would never be his, not now, and not after my death. All his careful planning had just evaporated. Dad, Emily's voice was a shocked whisper. Why would you do this? Why wouldn't you want the family business to stay in the family? Because that was your mother's wish, I answered. She believed the business should be guided by people who share her values and her vision, regardless of blood ties. And I agree with her. You've disinherited your own grandchildren, Emily cried out. What grandchildren? I raised an eyebrow. The ones you and Mark keep postponing until you achieve a certain level of status and income? The ones you suddenly remembered when there was money involved? Emily flinched as if I had struck her. I had never spoken to her with such bluntness, but this was no time for soft words. You can't do this, she stammered. It's not fair. Life is often unfair, honey, I sighed. And you know what else isn't fair? The way you and Mark have treated me, and your mother, for the past several years. The way you dismissed our needs, looked down on us, and the way you've treated me since she passed away. We cared about you, Emily's voice rose. You cared so much you couldn't find the time to visit more than once a month. You cared by suggesting I sell my home and move into a nursing home so you wouldn't have to worry about me. You cared by discussing my mental fitness behind my back and bringing a lawyer to threaten me if I didn't hand over money. I spoke quietly, but each word landed. Emily grew pale, tears welling in her eyes. Arthur, Mark tried to regain control. You're misunderstanding everything. We truly want what's best for you. Don't bother, Mark. I held up a hand to silence him. We both know you're only interested in the money. You've never hidden your disdain for me. You thought I was a senile old man you could push around, but as you can see, I am still quite capable of defending myself and my wife's legacy. Mark clenched his jaw but said nothing. Greenberg closed the folder and handed it back to me. Under the circumstances, he said formally, I would advise my clients to reconsider their position. Challenging this agreement would be an uphill and likely fruitless legal battle. Meaning we'll lose, Mark translated, shooting an angry look at the lawyer. There's a high probability of an unfavorable outcome, Greenberg corrected diplomatically. Great, Mark stood up. Just great. Come on, Emily, we're done here. Emily rose slowly, her eyes still fixed on me, filled with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. Daddy, her voice trembled, do you really believe we only care about the money? Don't you? I met her gaze directly. When was the last time you called just to ask how I was? When did you show any interest in my life, beyond whether it was time for me to sell my house or move into a facility? When was the last time you were my daughter instead of just Mark's wife? She looked away, unable to answer. Mark took her by the elbow and guided her toward the door. Greenberg followed, murmuring an apology. I remained in my chair, listening as the front door closed, as car doors slammed, as engines started and drove away down the gravel path. Only when the silence returned did I allow myself to exhale. It was a victory, but it brought no joy. Only the bitter sadness of realizing how deep the chasm between us had grown, how much of a stranger my own daughter had become. And yet, somewhere deep inside, there was a quiet flicker of pride. I had stood up for myself. I had protected Eleanor's legacy. I had proven that I was still capable of making my own decisions and fighting for what was right. Eleanor would have been proud. And right now, that was all that mattered. It had been a week since the ugly confrontation with Mark, Emily, and their lawyer. I tried to fall back into my daily routine, but a storm of emotions churned inside me. Pride in having defended myself and Eleanor's legacy warred with the bitter realization that the gap between my daughter and me now seemed unbridgeable. Emily didn't call. I didn't try to reach out to her either, sensing that we both needed time to process what had happened. Each evening, I would find myself staring at the phone, thinking about dialing her number, but I always stopped, not knowing what to say. How do you explain to your child that this was never about money, but about principles? On Thursday morning, as I was eating breakfast on the porch and enjoying a rare stretch of autumn sun, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone and felt a flicker of apprehension. Had Mark devised some new form of pressure? When I opened the door, I was surprised to see Catherine Hayes, Eleanor's sister, standing on the step. We hadn't seen each other since the funeral, though we had spoken on the phone a few times. At 65, Catherine still possessed the grace and quiet confidence that was a hallmark of the Harrison women. Her dark, silver-streaked hair was pinned up elegantly, and she had a look of determination in her eyes that reminded me so much of Eleanor. Arthur. She smiled and gave me a tight hug. I'm sorry to drop in unannounced, but I felt a face-to-face chat would be better than a call. Catherine, I was genuinely happy to see her. Please come in. I was just having breakfast on the porch. Will you join me? I'd love to. She followed me through the house, through the EU. This place still feels so warm. Eleanor always knew how to create a special atmosphere. I've tried to keep it just the way she liked it, I said, leading Catherine out to the porch table. I poured her some coffee from the carafe and we made small talk for a few minutes about the weather, our health, mutual friends, the usual preamble to the more serious conversation I knew was coming. Arthur, Catherine finally said, setting down her cup, I heard about what happened with Mark and Emily. Robert told me about your confrontation. I sighed. News travels fast. It's a family business, she shrugged. There are no secrets, especially when that kind of money is involved. Robert was very impressed with how you handled the trust. He said he didn't expect such business savvy from you. From a quiet, retired engineer, I couldn't help a bitter chuckle. Everyone seems to forget that I spent 30 years managing multi-million-dollar projects, including, as it happens, the construction of the new wing at the Harrison manufacturing plant back in the 90s. I remember, Catherine nodded. Eleanor was so proud of your work on that. She said you were the only contractor who ever brought a project in on time and under budget. We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in memories of a time when our families were closer, when the future felt simpler. How is Emily? Catherine asked. Have you spoken since that day? No, I shook my head. She hasn't called, and neither have I. I wouldn't know what to say to her. She's furious, Catherine said plainly. Mark has completely turned her against you. They were at Robert's for dinner on Monday, and Emily went on and on about how you'd betrayed the family and stolen her inheritance. I winced. Hearing it confirmed was painful, though not unexpected. That's Mark's voice coming out of her mouth, I sighed. He was always a master at manipulation. He is, Catherine agreed. But Emily is an adult. She is responsible for her own words and actions, even if she is under someone's influence. I nodded, knowing she was right. As much as I wanted to blame Mark for everything, I couldn't absolve Emily of her part in the destruction of our relationship. Do you know what upset Mark the most? Catherine asked with a small, wry smile. That he wouldn't get his hands on the shares even after you're gone. Exactly, she nodded. He had already drawn up plans for how he would restructure the company. He was telling Robert all about his vision for Harrison Manufacturing's future, a more aggressive growth strategy, potential acquisitions of competitors, expansion into overseas markets. Everything Eleanor fought against, I remarked. She always said that rapid expansion often sacrifices quality and corporate culture. Eleanor was a wise woman. Catherine gazed out at the garden where she and her sister had played as children. She could see right through people, and she saw Mark for what he was, ambitious, calculating, and willing to use anyone, including her daughter, to get what he wanted. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I recognized Mark's BMW, and my body tensed. "Looks like you have more company," Catherine noted, recognizing the car as well. "I wasn't expecting them," I muttered, starting to get up. "I'm sorry, I'll come with you," Catherine said firmly, rising to her feet. "Perhaps my presence will help keep things civil." We walked through the house to the front door. I opened it just before Mark had pressed the doorbell. He looked startled to see me standing there, but he quickly composed himself. "Arthur," he nodded, "we need to talk." "Hello, Mark." I didn't move from the doorway. "Where is Emily?" "She's in the car," he glanced over his shoulder. "She's not feeling well. I wanted to speak with you alone first." "About what? I thought we said everything there was to say last time." "Arthur, be sensible," Mark lowered his voice. "This situation is hurting everyone. Emily is devastated. She feels betrayed and rejected by her own father." "I wonder who put that idea in her head," I said dryly. "Look," he stepped closer. "We can still resolve this peacefully. I understand you don't want to transfer the shares now, but we can draw up an inheritance agreement, one that guarantees that upon your death they go to Emily, instead of being sold off at auction." "Ah, so that's it," I shook my head. "You're still angling to get control of the company, just on a slightly longer timeline." "This isn't about control," Mark said, his voice rising with irritation. "It's about justice. It's about the family legacy." "Family legacy?" Catherine's voice cut in sharply from behind me. She stepped forward to stand beside me. "That's an interesting phrase coming from the man who was planning to completely upend the company's strategy, going against everything the Harrisons have built for decades." Mark visibly paled at the sight of her. "Catherine," he forced a smile, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I visit my family," she replied coolly. "Unlike some people, I don't just show up when there's money on the table." Just then, the car door opened and Emily got out. She looked pale and worn out, as if she hadn't slept in days. "Daddy," she said, walking toward us and ignoring Catherine. "We have to talk. Alone." "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Catherine," I replied, gesturing for them to enter. "Let's not air our family business on the front lawn." We moved into the living room. Emily and Mark sat on the sofa, while Catherine and I took the armchairs opposite them. "Now," I said, looking at my daughter, "I'm listening." "Daddy, why are you doing this to us?" Emily began, her voice shaking with a mix of hurt and anger. "What did we ever do to you?" I could see the genuine confusion in her eyes, and it broke my heart, but I couldn't back down now. "I'm not doing anything to you, Emily," I replied calmly. "I'm honoring your mother's wishes and protecting the legacy she entrusted to me." "But I'm her daughter," Emily cried. "Her only child. Why did she cut me out? Did she not love me?" She spoke the last words in a near whisper, and I saw tears spring to her eyes. "She loved you more than anything in this world, Emily," I said softly. "But she also saw what was happening to you, to us, to our family. She saw how you were changing, how you were pulling away, how you were letting Mark make every decision for you." "That's not true," Emily shot back. "Mark has never controlled me. We're partners. We decide things together." "Really?" I looked her right in the eye. "Then tell me, Emily, was it your decision not to come to the hospital when I had a heart attack? Was it your choice to miss your mother's last Christmas at home to go to a ski resort with Mark's business partners? Was it your decision to give up the design career that you loved?" Emily paled. Mark put a hand on her shoulder. "Don't answer that," he said. "He's just trying to manipulate you, to make you feel guilty." "I am not manipulating," I countered. "I am simply stating facts that you seem to have conveniently forgotten. Facts about how you have allowed your life, your choices, and your relationship with your parents to be subsumed by your husband's ambition." "This is absurd," Mark sneered. "You make me sound like some villain from a soap opera. I love Emily, and I've always wanted what's best for her." "Best by your standards," Catherine interjected, "which, coincidentally, always seem to align with what's best for you." "You have no right to judge our marriage," Mark snapped, his composure finally cracking. "You don't know what we discuss in private, what our plans are." "But I do know how you discussed your father-in-law behind his back," Catherine parried, "how you referred to him as a doddering old fool, how you and your colleagues discussed the possibility of having him declared incompetent to gain control of his assets long before you even knew about Eleanor's inheritance." I stared at Catherine, then at Mark, whose face had gone ashen. That's a lie," he stammered. "I never—" "Benjamin Summers," Catherine said, naming one of the city's most prominent investment bankers. "You had this conversation with him at the charity gala back in February. Ben is an old family friend, Mark. He was quite disgusted by your cynicism." Emily's shocked gaze darted between Mark and Catherine. "Is that true?" she asked quietly. "Mark, did you really say that about my father?" "Emily, don't listen to them," Mark said, squeezing her hand. "They're trying to turn us against each other, to destroy our family." "Our family?" I couldn't stay silent any longer. "What about her family, Mark? The one she grew up in? The one you have systematically pushed aside for the sake of your own career?" "Dad, stop it!" Emily covered her face with her hands. "I can't listen to this anymore." "Because it's the truth," Catherine said gently. "And deep down, you know it, Emily. You're just afraid to admit to yourself how much you've given up to follow Mark." "That's enough," Mark stood up abruptly. "We're leaving. I will not sit here and let you people brainwash my wife." "My wife?" I stood as well, anger rising in my chest. "She is a person, Mark, a person with her own thoughts, her own dreams, her own will. She is my daughter and Catherine's niece, not your property." "Emily, we're going," Mark said, pulling his wife by the arm. "These people wish us nothing but ill." Emily rose slowly, her eyes wide with tears. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why can't we all just be a family? Why does everything have to be so difficult?" "Because some people make it difficult, honey," I replied. "Some people prioritize money and status above family." "You mean you?" Emily suddenly lashed out, anger flashing in her eyes. "You're the one who took my mother's inheritance. You're the one who decided I wasn't worthy of being part of my own family's business." "I never said you weren't worthy," I countered. "I'm simply respecting the wishes of your mother, who saw how you were changing under Mark's influence, how you let him dictate your life, how you drifted away from your own roots, your own values." "My values?" Emily laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You have no right to judge my values. You barely even know me anymore." "And whose fault is that?" I asked quietly. "Who stopped visiting, stopped calling, stopped showing any interest in my life? Who started looking at me like I was a burden that needed to be put away in a home?" Emily recoiled as if I'd slapped her. A flicker of something, maybe shame, crossed her face, but Mark was already pulling her to the door. "This conversation is over," he stated. "Emily, let's go. We are not welcome here." "You are always welcome here, Emily," I said, ignoring Mark. "This is your home, this is your family. but I will not allow you or your mother's legacy to be manipulated." Emily paused at the threshold and turned back. Her face was a mask of conflicting emotions: hurt, anger, confusion. "You're selfish, Daddy," she said, her voice shaking. "You're a cruel, stubborn old man who can't stand to see his daughter grow up and live her own life. You're just jealous of the happiness I have with Mark." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. I stood there, stunned, unable to form a reply. Catherine came to my side and placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "One day you will see how wrong you are, Emily," she said calmly. "And when you do, remember that your father will always love you and be waiting for you." Emily didn't answer. She turned and hurried out of the house. Mark followed, a look of triumph in his eyes. A minute later, we heard the sound of their car speeding away. I sank back into my chair, feeling completely drained. All the words I had wanted to say, all the explanations I had prepared, had been useless against her wall of anger and pain. "She doesn't understand," I whispered. "She truly believes I did this out of spite." "She's confused," Catherine said softly, sitting beside me. "Mark has been manipulating her for years, isolating her from us, forcing her to see the world through his lens. It's no surprise she can't see the truth right away." "But what if she never sees it?" I looked at Catherine, the pain raw in my eyes. "What if I've lost her for good?" "I don't believe that will happen," Catherine shook her head. "Emily is a smart woman, and she has Harrison blood in her veins. Sooner or later she will see Mark for who he truly is. In the meantime," Catherine continued, "you have another family, Arthur. Me, Robert, our children, Harrison Manufacturing. All the people who value you and what you bring to the table. Don't let this conflict with Emily and Mark define the rest of your life." "About your brother's offer," I said, gathering my resolve. "I'm in. I want to be more involved in the company. I want to contribute, to use my experience, not just sit at home waiting for what?" Catherine smiled, and for a moment I saw Eleanor's reflection in her eyes. "Welcome to the board, Arthur," she said, extending her hand. "Eleanor would be so proud." 3 months had passed since the day Emily had stormed out of my house. In that time, not a single word had been exchanged between us. I had tried calling twice, but both times it went straight to voicemail. The third time, I didn't bother leaving a message. If my daughter did not wish to speak with me, I would not force the issue. At her age, maintaining a relationship with one's parents is a choice, born of love and respect, not of obligation. The ache of our estrangement hadn't disappeared, but it had settled into a dull, familiar throb, like an old injury that flares up in bad weather. I was learning to live with it, refusing to let it poison every day. At 76, I knew the value of time too well to squander it on regrets. My life had changed more in those 3 months than it had in the past decade. After years of quiet retirement, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was once again an active participant in the world, not just a passive observer. Joining the board of Harrison Manufacturing had opened an entirely new chapter. At first, I worried I wouldn't be able to keep up, that my experience was obsolete, that the younger staff would see me as a relic. But those fears vanished quickly. I walked into my first board meeting with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. As I entered the conference room on the top floor of the main office building, the chatter subsided. Catherine, sitting at the head of the table, rose to greet me. "Dichon." "Gentlemen," she announced to the room, "I'd like to introduce the newest member of our executive committee, Arthur Miller. Many of you knew him as Eleanor's husband, but he is here today as a major shareholder and an experienced executive whose insight will be invaluable to this company." Robert Harrison, Eleanor's brother, shook my hand warmly. Welcome to the family business, Arthur. We're glad to finally have you with us. The other board members greeted me with what felt like genuine respect and anticipation, not just polite deference. The first item on the agenda was the new line of eco-friendly lubricants, the project Eleanor had championed before she fell ill. I listened intently as the team presented reports on development, production, and marketing. When the discussion turned to the construction of the new production facility, I couldn't hold back. "Forgive me," I said, studying the proposed layout, "but this design has some serious inefficiencies in its spatial planning. If we reorient the packaging line to be adjacent to the warehouse and rethink the materials workflow, we could cut logistical costs by at least 15%. A silence fell over the room. I was beginning to worry I had overstepped, but then Catherine laughed. "This, gentleman, is why we asked him to join us. Please go on, Arthur." I stood and walked to the projector screen displaying the plans. With a marker, I began to sketch out my proposed changes, explaining how to optimize the space, shorten production cycles, and reduce energy consumption. 30 years of managing development projects hadn't been for nothing. I saw opportunities for improvement that the younger designers, focused on the latest software, had overlooked in favor of fundamental principles of industrial efficiency. By the end of the meeting, my suggestions were unanimously adopted. The project's lead architect, a young man named Ben Carter, approached me afterward, his notebook filled with questions. Instead of finding my input outdated, he was eager to learn. "Mr. Miller," he said, shaking my hand, "I studied your projects from the 90s in college. The renovation of the East Wing here at Harrison is still used as a case study in effective industrial design. It's an honor to work with you." I was both touched and taken aback. I never imagined my old work was being studied in universities, or that the younger generation even knew of my career. From that day forward, my life took on a new rhythm. I went into the office 3 times a week, participating in meetings, consulting with engineers and architects, and helping to streamline production processes. My experience proved to be more valuable than I could have imagined, especially when paired with the technological expertise of the younger professionals. At home, my evenings were spent researching new materials and technologies to stay current. Ben often stopped by with blueprints or just to talk shop. He reminded me of myself at that age, passionate, driven, and open to learning from his elders. In his presence, I didn't feel like an old dinosaur, but like a mentor passing on his knowledge. But the most surprising development was the bond I formed with Catherine's family, especially her son, Leo. A 32-year-old sustainability consultant, Leo was in Concord for the summer, working with Harrison's Environmental Compliance Department. We met at a company picnic Catherine hosted to celebrate the successful first run of the new lubricants. "So you're the Uncle Arthur my mom won't stop talking about," Leo said, walking up to me with a glass of iced tea. "The engineer who single-handedly saved the green lubricants project." "Your mother exaggerates," I smiled. "I just made a few suggestions." "A few suggestions that saved the company $500,000, Leo grinned. "I've seen the numbers. It's impressive." We fell into conversation, and I was struck by his deep knowledge of industrial ecology. He spoke about new methods for waste reduction, the concept of a zero-waste production loop, and the potential for renewable energy in the chemical sector. I, in turn, shared my experience designing energy-efficient facilities, and we quickly found that our interests aligned in many areas. "You know," Leo said as the picnic wound down, "I'm working on a project to optimize water usage in chemical plants. I could really use your input. Maybe we could get together and talk about it sometime." And so began a collaboration that blossomed into a friendship, Leo would come over to my house and we would spend hours working on his project, debating ideas and sketching out solutions. Sometimes Ben would join us, and my quiet home would fill with the energetic buzz of young minds, fresh perspectives, and lively discussion. Leo, unlike Emily, was genuinely curious about my life, my opinions, and my past. He asked about how Eleanor and I met, how I built my career, which projects I was most proud of. He wanted to know about his grandparents, about the founding of Harrison Manufacturing, and about the core values the company was built on. "It's incredible," he said one afternoon, looking through old family photos. "I always thought of Grandpa Harrison as this stoic businessman obsessed with the bottom line. But it turns out he was a real visionary who believed the chemical industry could be environmentally conscious." "He was ahead of his time," I nodded. In the 60s, very few were thinking about industrial impact on the environment, but he was already implementing closed-loop water systems and working to reduce emissions. Eleanor inherited that vision. Her green lubricants project was a direct continuation of his ideals. Leo hesitated, turning a photo of his grandfather over in his hands. "You know, I always felt like a bit of an outsider in this family. My interests always seemed too idealistic, not practical enough. My parents hoped I'd become a chemical engineer like my grandfather or a financier like my dad. I chose environmental science instead. They never disapproved, but I always felt like I'd let them down." "In fact," I said, "you are the one who is closest to your grandfather's original vision. You've simply chosen a modern path to the same destination, a responsible, sustainable business." Leo's eyes lit up. "You really think so?" "I know so," I smiled. "Your grandfather would be proud of you, and Eleanor would be too." After that talk, Leo started coming by even more often. Sometimes he brought his girlfriend, Lauren, a young history teacher from the local college. Sometimes Catherine would join us, and we would have impromptu family dinners. My house, which had felt so empty and silent after Eleanor's death, was once again filled with voices, laughter, and life. I thought of Eleanor's words from her letter. "Do not let your grief for me overshadow the years you have left. Live, enjoy every single day." I finally understood what she meant, not just existing, but truly living, with new interests, new friendships, new joys. Of course, I still missed Emily. Every time the phone rang, a small part of me hoped it would be her. Every holiday, I thought of her, remembering how we used to celebrate together when she was a little girl. But I was learning not to let that pain consume my new life. In the early fall, to celebrate the successful launch of the green lubricants line, the company hosted a large event. Robert Harrison invited business partners, local politicians, and the media. I was asked to give a short presentation on the innovative aspects of the production facility. I was as nervous as a student before an exam. It was one thing to discuss technical details with a small group of engineers, but another entirely to present to the public. Leo helped me prepare, patiently listening to me rehearse and offering tips to make my presentation more engaging. "You've got this, Uncle Arthur," he said the night before. "No one knows this project better than you do." "It's not easy speaking in front of a crowd at my age," I confessed. "I'm afraid I'll forget something or mix up the numbers." "That's what the slides are for," Leo smiled. "But even if you do forget something, it doesn't matter. People aren't coming to see a perfect speech. They're coming to hear from the man who saved and elevated a major project. Your experience speaks for itself." His encouragement bolstered my confidence, and the next day, I felt ready. The event was held in the main hall of the city's convention center, which was packed with people. I spotted a few of my old colleagues from my engineering firm in the crowd. They waved, and I felt a surge of pride. They had come to support me. When Robert Harrison introduced me as a key figure in the project's success, I walked onto the stage to a round of applause. Taking a deep breath, I began to speak, talking about how an innovative approach to industrial design had made the new facility both more efficient and more environmentally sound. I spoke with clarity and passion, fueled by my genuine enthusiasm for the work. I showed slides, explained charts, and drew on examples from my own long career. The audience was completely engaged. When I finished, the hall erupted in applause. Afterward, I was surrounded by people, journalists, business leaders, my old colleagues. Everyone wanted to ask questions, to offer congratulations, to express their admiration. In that moment, I didn't feel like a 76-year-old widower. I felt like a professional in his prime, whose knowledge and experience were valued. Among the well-wishers was my old friend Sam Peterson, my chess partner. "Arthur," he said, gripping my hand firmly, "you look 20 years younger than you did 3 months ago. What happened?" "Life happened, Sam," I smiled. "Just life." At the reception afterward, I stood with Catherine, Leo, Lauren, and Ben as Robert Harrison raised a glass to the project's success. "I want to thank the one person without whom tonight would not be possible," he said, looking in my direction. "Arthur, your contribution has been immeasurable. You didn't just salvage Eleanor's project. You breathed new life into it. You made it better, more efficient, and more forward-thinking. Eleanor would be so proud of you." Tears welled in my eyes. The knowledge that I'd been able to carry on Eleanor's work to protect and enhance her legacy filled me with a profound sense of peace. "I'm only fulfilling her wishes," I replied, raising my own glass. "To Eleanor, and to her vision for this company's future." "To Eleanor," everyone echoed. Driving home after the celebration, I felt a deep sense of contentment. It was as if a circle had closed, as if all the turmoil and difficult decisions of the past few months had led me to this moment of recognition, of respect, of duty fulfilled to my wife's memory. Back at home, I sat in Eleanor's armchair by the window, looking out at the moonlit garden. I replayed the events of the last few months, the painful conflict with Mark and Emily, the decision to join the board, my growing closeness with Leo and his family, the success of the project. Each event had changed me, forced me to adapt, to learn, to grow. I thought about Emily and her accusations of selfishness. Perhaps from her perspective, that's what it looked like. Perhaps she would never understand my motivations, and maybe I had to accept that. But I also thought about the new family I had found. Leo, who was like a son to me. Ben, who saw me as a mentor. Catherine and Robert, who had welcomed me as a true member of the Harrison family. I thought about the people at the company who respected me for my expertise, not pitied me as a lonely old man. I realized that my break with Emily, as painful as it was, had opened up new doors. Freed from a toxic dynamic, from the constant feeling of being judged and found lacking, I had been able to rediscover my own value, my own potential, my own capacity for a full and meaningful life, even at my age. My house, which once felt too large and empty, was now filled with new memories, new voices, and new energy. It was no longer a museum of the past, but a place where the present and future were being built. I knew the door would always be open for Emily. If she ever saw the truth about Mark, if she ever realized how he had manipulated her, if she ever wanted to rebuild our relationship, I would welcome her back without hesitation. But I would no longer put my life on hold, waiting for a reconciliation that might never happen. Instead, I would live. I would live fully, actively, and gratefully for every day, for every opportunity, and for every person who had come into my life. I would continue Eleanor's work, protecting and building upon her legacy, I would share my experience with the next generation, helping them learn and grow. And maybe one day Emily would see me not as a cruel, stubborn old man, but as someone who simply stood up for what he believed in, who honored his principles even when it was difficult and painful. But for now, I would enjoy this new chapter of my life, one filled with challenges, discoveries, and genuine connections with people who appreciated me for exactly who I am.